Welcome again to the Tech Marketing Podcast. I'm very pleased to be joined in the virtual recording booth by Jaymi, a consulting CMO at Pentaho and TEDx presenter. So, got big expectations for today, but I'm also really pleased to be joined by two fellow Togetherers. Minaz, you've been a guest on our podcast. You've joined me in this virtual recording booth and the physical recording booth a fair few times. But a new guest today, Vicki. Vicki is one of our account directors. So Vicki and Minaz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Really excited to go through some of your thoughts today. You've had a brilliant career in both brand and marketing, but Pentaho is your first exposure in B2B. That's right, isn't it? So, how was that move going from B2C to B2B? Both in terms of some of the differences and some of the things that are most similar.
Um, yeah, it was fascinating. The differences stood out immediately. As I was brought in actually to craft a narrative for a data management platform by a woman who knows my work in the B2C world, Maggie Laird. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Story for data management platform. I do stories. This is my career. I'd love to get in there and see, how I can weave a tale. And as I started looking, of course, at the product, but then at like the competitive set and the industry, I was like, holy smokes, everyone sounds the same. I can put any logo on any other data management platform and it's going to work. And that was a big difference. In B2C, the voice, the personality, we try to make it very human. We put avatars together, not just for our target customers, but for ourselves. Um, a good consumer brand, you can imagine what car they drive, what labels they put on their bodies. But it was apparent that in B2B, um, I don't know, that work's not done. And so I put myself in the position of listen, 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 listen. And then, as I began to get demos of the product from the internal team and hear their stories about how long they've been working there and what they believe, I was like, oh, well, it's just the same. It's just the same as consumer. These are just people who show up to work and make stuff and sell it to other people. And particularly for Pentaho. Pentaho's been around for a long, long time. And, it talk about being able to trust somebody with your data, somebody who's done it year after year after year and is used by all the big companies. But also having such a legacy, the user interface, for example, was it like some snazzy startup put in a bunch of UX and UI design? And I began to get just a lot of apologies for user interface. And, that's I think some of that B2C, all of us now as consumers and the empowerment we have with, these computers that are in our pockets and all of the world's data at our fingertips. There's not a lot of difference between, consumer and business these days. You can stand up a business if you want, like this. And, we all sort of now think everything needs to look super snazzy and colorful and like, almost like gamification was such a word that everyone started to use. And I just was like, huh, you guys are like radically simple. I mean, my last role as CMO, we had a complete in-house agency. And to get any work done, we were spending, millions of dollars a month on paid media. And to pull a report, we had to go put a ticket in to the data team to put a report together and give us results on what we were doing. And I was like, wait, if we were using Pentaho, it's drag and drop. Like every single marketer in the marketing org could pull our own reports. You know how much time and money that would save us and how much efficiency we would find? And so I started to understand like this, apology that I was getting for them thinking they needed to be more like B2C brands and like super sexy and cool was just, I don't know, that's misplaced too. So I think that I went around and about on your answer. The similarities and the differences, Yeah, these are a bunch of people who show up and make really good stuff to sell to other people. And the difference is that, sometimes they think they need to be swanky when they don't, and they're missing story almost across the board in B2B, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. Like, and actually, we were talking beforehand in the green room. That there's a particular passion from some of our other podcast guests as well that you need to bring more story to the table. There's one particular thing you started with there, though, Jaymi, that I want to drill down into because it's a trend we're seeing across B2B massively at the moment. Because you started with this concept that B2C and B2B is still just selling to people, like same, but different. But we've also got this concept now in B2B that just so much of our marketing is the same. Um, and that doesn't just go for marketing, by the way, that goes for almost everything inside the organization. I recently had the pleasure talking and public speaking, had the pleasure to keynote at a sales kickoff, and the two people that I followed onto the stage for before me were both dressed the same both looked the same, and then turned up in the same jacket, in the same color shirt, in the same shoe. Like we even get to the point now we are almost carbon copies of each other, and it is we've got to remember that we have to. It's our job to kind of stand out and to find what's different in us. So talking about some of the things that are the same and things that are different, that really stood out for me. And the answer is like that's the power of story, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure we're going to get here. I've been in marketing for a long time, and a lot of people will be inspired by somebody's story. Take like an Apple story or a Nike story, and they'll say, we need to do one like that. And they'll want to actually do their version of that great story. And um, you guys know this, I say this all the time. The only story that you need is yours. It has to be true. What is your true story? And, I think the problem is people have a hard time finding what's interesting in their true story, which is where when I come along and I just do a lot of deep listening, there's always something very interesting with your story if you go deep enough. Like what's the beginning of that line? Because at the beginning of that line is like that kindling, like that spark that started something. Um, so as long as it's true, that's the first and last thing I'll say for all this. I think I'm also getting a bunch of sun on me. Is it must be true. And frankly, the easiest thing you're going to do is tell your true story. It's the easiest thing. You won't have to remember it. You're not going to have to keep up with yourself. Just keep showing up.
Minaz, I'm going to bring you in here for your view. Like, we've always been saying for the B2B side that people are always saying that there shouldn't be a difference. But what do you think? Is that, should there be a difference between B2C and B2B? I can't even get it right. It's this time on a Friday. I can't even say it right. Minaz, let's bring you in to add some new thought here.
No problem at all. Good. Yeah, I think for me, it's the age-old argument, isn't it? There's like, is there a difference between the two? I feel that we aren't consumers from 5:31 till 7:59 or wherever we start work in the morning. We buy with the same sort of level of rigor. I think we look to the same sources for credibility. We all want to be part of a cool club. Who doesn't? We're tribal by people, and I think that is very much influences different purchasing decisions. The one thing I would say though is that I think the data even shows that the emotion that's often linked with a B2B decision is actually greater than a B2C, and that at the end of the day, if I buy the wrong toaster, I'm going to get some kids that complain about uncooked toast. If I buy a new pair of trainers, it'll probably be someone in my family or my wife that complains about that. But ultimately, I'm not going to lose my job. Well, hopefully not, unless they're really bad trainers, of course. But realistically, when we start to get into the realms of the kind of decision makers that we're talking to, these are real big, can be life changing, can be, no one got promoted for, or whatever the saying is about IBM. No one got promoted for not buying IBM. It's like these are people's livelihoods, and if you get that decision wrong, that can have some pretty catastrophic or really ignite success if you get it right. So I think these decisions are made a lot more emotionally than we probably give them credit for. And I think it's important that brands do tap into that level of emotion and that fear and that aspiration and that joy of buying, a new Hitachi server rack or whatever, in a storage rack, or even a, Pentaho's latest solution. Like, I think when you can associate a level of emotion with that purchase in B2B, I think you're definitely onto a winning strategy. The name's going to come up a lot probably during this, right? Salesforce do that. When you buy Salesforce or buy into Salesforce, you're part of that community. You're part of that club. You get that warm feeling inside that I joined a tribe, and that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Minaz, there's a lot to drive into there, because I think the other thing we're seeing is that lack of buyer confidence as they were. That reference, that IBM campaign. No one ever got fired for buying IBM. Is if people aren't worried about messing up if they buy a product like that, and you need to add those elements into your brand. But before we dive into it, I want to come back to a little bit of your career, Jaymi, because you've worked at some of the most impressive brands that I, you mentioned a couple of the Xbox, Nike, like talking about stories. Like, tell us a story. Like, when did this realization around the power of stories first impact you?
Oh gosh. I mean, I've been telling stories my whole life, to be honest. But and I didn't work for Nike. I worked with them when I was at Xbox. But I think I was exposed to such world class branding and story. JDK out of Vermont. I'm not even sure they're still JDK anymore. They were a small little agency in Burlington, Vermont that mostly did like snowboards. And they won the Xbox account for the Xbox 360 uh, generation. And I sat in that pitch, and Michael Jager, the J of JDK, came in just a t-shirt and jeans, and got up to give his pitch to the team. And he took a huge black Sharpie and he wrote this huge X on his t-shirt. then he then he just ripped it off, like right there at the X. And his whole thing was, what's what's so fascinating is what's inside. And if you look at, the logo itself, there's a pulse of green. It's in the middle of that X. And it became just full on story. It wasn't, we have the greatest console with the greatest, most hard drive space and the fastest online gaming and no speeds and feeds, nothing like that. It was this like pulse of something, and we got to explain what the something was. And I don't know, maybe people want to look this up. There was the campaign was called Jump In, and he ripped this off, and he started like, get into the X, get in, jump in. And there was a brand video that we launched with, which was all it was people jump roping, but to this incredible music. And if you've ever seen like real street jump roping, oh, it's amazing. And they've got a guy on a bike who's bouncing in and jumping rope on his bike. And it was my first exposure to really what it is to start telling stories that genuinely move you from somewhere way deeper than a decision to buy or not buy a video game console. And yeah, I think I was really blessed to be part of that launch. And from the very beginning, 2 years before anybody in the world even knew it was going to exist, I was on that team that was preparing for that launch. So, and I just carry it from there. And that's, I think, probably a big genesis of my wanting to go deep. And this is a difference, B2B, Vicki. B2C people want to go deep, and it makes sense to them to get into their heart. If they're going to be selling the trainers that propel you as an athlete, or something else. B2B, they're wondering what the heck I'm even talking about. Why are we going there? Why are you asking about what I'm passionate about? Or what, when I was a kid, what I love to do. What does that have to do with anything? But I do. Those are the questions that I asked.
I think we need to ask more of that, though, in B2B. Like, to Minaz's point around Salesforce being a great example. Like the first thing they ever do when they stand up on stage is say, look at all of our admins, look at all of our developers. Like this is the reason why you want to be part of this. They build that emotional connection. I also want there's just one tiny piece of evidence or hint you gave out there. You started that campaign 2 years before the product launch. Like I can't imagine, like Vicki, I'm going to bring you in here. Can you imagine, like as an account director, being like having that much sight of like we're going to start planning this out and be able to do it in B2B? We're lucky if we get 2 months, something. Like how, like where are we missing a trick between the two? Because I find that's awesome, but also I feel like almost something we need to fix, because we are driven toward quarterly reporting right now in B2B, and it's just breaking things.
Well, I will say the agency wasn't 2 years in advance, but the marketing was, obviously. And that, my whole premise on building authentic brands that genuinely are lit by real human something is that is the fire that builds product, that recruits talent, that gets investment, that finds partners. That is the fire that creates amazing companies, amazing products, amazing employee bases, amazing morale, and of course, marketing. And so the other good thing about Xbox that I learned, I mean, that's sort of where I grew up, is marketing was at the table. From the beginning, we were at the table. And, what we learned and what we understood, and being just so kind of passionate about the customer, um, went in from the base level up, which I think, that's where a lot falls down, is a great marketing campaign can, as we say, put lipstick on a pig, but that's short-lived and very expensive. Um, but yeah, that's why I think brand, people think it's a logo and a campaign. It's the fire. It's the thing that lights everything. It's the thing that keeps the lights on for the whole company. And those companies that do it well, they have very little turnover of their employees, very little turnover of customers. They charge higher prices on average. All of their most fundamental metrics of health are better when they're very, very true and they stick with it. The ones who are just a really great campaign and look good and sound good, but you know, don't look behind the curtain. And we know those companies. The turnover is incredible, employees and customers, and they need to keep discounting to keep customers. It's just bad business.
I think also, just to add into that, I think there's I always think it's interesting as well looking at, I don't think that a lot of marketing versus smart marketing is the key to really unlocking like powerful brands. And I always think someone like Ferrari, Ferrari is still globally the most recognized and one of the most valuable brands from a brand sentiment point of view, but they don't advertise apart from obviously the F1 team, but they're not an advertising led company, and still to this day that the value of how they make you feel when you even say the name is world class. Any thoughts on what the secret is to that success, as to how the hell that works? Because that blows my mind still, and I'm still racking my brain trying to think, how did they crack that?
I think that's, we talked about it earlier. So if I back up just a little bit on why I even talk about resonance, we use it very colloquially. We've used it today. Oh, I resonate with that. But what we're really saying is energetically, I'm matching you. Energetically. Before my head, I'm feeling something. Before I'm thinking it, I'm feeling it, right? That's how we humans work. And when we are on the same wavelength, another energy term, with someone, or we vibe the same way, I like your vibe, energetically we match. And this is why I'm saying don't fake it, because actually you can't fake resonance. You can try to fake it till you make it, or put a big smile on and maybe things will start to come around. But fundamentally, I know the people that are most important in your lives, You have a deep, energetic bond with them, and you could go kind of through war and be okay at the end because you are tied. Same with companies. And, Enzo Ferrari is a really good example of this. His the depth of his passion for doing what he did as well as he could. And of course, like probably Hermes is another one of those. The depth of passion for the craftsmanship and the willingness to say no, no matter how much money you give me, no. Um, Not exactly. That's how deep it goes. And because that goes so deep, anybody else who also shares that comes together. So what resonates congregates. Literally, if you think about in terms of like just physics, energetically, like attracts like. It's just how our universe works. And we are the same as consumers and brands. And so the more true they can be, the less they need to advertise. This is kind of what I say. It just keeps coming back to it's good business to be true and to really mine for it and be committed to it. And of course, you have to be excellent. It's not just enough to be true and have a great business. You have to be excellent. But guess who's going to, attract the best engineers and the best designers? It's those brands that you can feel and trust because you can feel it, not just think it.
There's also a kind of a slight, I don't know, just exploring certain brands have their own sort of brand strategy, and I don't know. This is just an observation from myself. Is that I think the brands often fall into like accessible versus untouchable, and you can decide who your brand wants to be. So the Ferraris, Porsches, even I mean, it's pretty more luxury goods actually. To be honest with you, they create that level of you know desire, FOMO, untouchable. It's reaching for the stars to be able to really get something like that, and therefore it feels so special. And then other brands really lean themselves on we're open, we're the brand for everybody. Not everybody, but we're the brand for the like-minded, and we'll build a community and we'll build. But that element of community and tribe still exists at both ends of the polarity, which I always think is important. Which still comes back to my point that I think Pentaho do this well as well, right? You've got a good community of people that really like love the brand, they love the product, and they really advocate for it. And I think if you can sell a lot to a small number of people, that's an incredibly powerful foundation to build a strong business anyway.
I totally agree. Yeah, this doesn't have to do, to your point, with like luxury and not luxury, accessibility. I think one of the brands I also admire the most is probably Costco, and it's talk about low price. Walmart is the low price leader, but then there's Costco who, will give you, product for product, the best value you can possibly get. So why are those brands so different? And why do the employees at Costco stick around for, I don't even know, their average employee tenure is ridiculous. How long their employees stay around. Um, and also their members, we don't cancel. And it's just, you don't need a high price tag to get that sort of loyalty. You just have to care deeply and honestly, which the Costco leadership team does.
Costco's a great example, actually, and I mean, even Walmart, if to some degree, from when its original founding and some of its values. Like when you talk about these authentic brands, what it comes down to me is kind of which values do you resonate with. But let's take a pause there for a moment and just let's each come up with a brand that we really admire, and then dive into why. Maybe try and figure out, Jaymi, how your model works with it. So, Minaz, you mentioned Salesforce. Goodness, I need to come up with a brand. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Vicki, I'm going to bring you in. Come up with your brand. Which ones resonate with you?
Mine is maybe slightly left of field. It's possibly more on the B2C side of things, but a brand, in my opinion, that's doing really well at the moment is the fitness brand Gymshark. So I am a fitness enthusiast. I love this brand. I feel like they understand what I'm looking for. That the way that they market their collateral very much resonates with me, and I think they've done really well tapping into the insights that they're capturing through social listening and the things that these influencers are talking about to build a really strong online community that's actually doing quite a lot of the work for them. and the brand is going from strength to strength. So, I mean, I think they've recently opened up a huge flagship store in Regent Street in London. So they've gone from kind of being like a little bit of a kind of online presence into a physical presence. And I think the reason behind that is that they've got now a real knack and understanding for what their audience want and how to connect with them. And in my opinion, that's key to their impressive growth. And again, as an advocate of theirs, completely unintentionally, I can't escape from them. They're everywhere now. So I think, as I say, they're a great example of a brand that has done its insight capturing, has learned what its customers want, and it speaks to us in the way that we want to be spoken to. So yeah, Gymshark for me.
Just to add on to that, actually, and sort of to dissect it a bit more, Gymshark's a really interesting brand where the story that sits behind it is Ben Francis' story. He's the world's youngest billionaire, or the UK's youngest, definitely, billionaire. I think he's 28 now, and his story of starting and stitching the Gymshark gym gear products in his outside of university in his garage, trying to make orders and fit them. And then his marketing strategy was to essentially use influencers in the fitness world. So he would literally give out free what I call drops, right? So he would drop certain clothing at particular events that were geared around muscle events. And that was it. They just went wild for it. And he built this stir of mystique and community amongst it before it even got to the sort of high level. And then now he's it's much more of a global brand. It's not as though it's a multi-billion dollar brand. I believe they've just opened actually last year, they opened their first barbers in London that you can walk in and get a free haircut and talk about mental health for them.
Wow.
So it's this idea of learn, earn, return, right? He's doing that and he's not even 30. So it's a great brand story. So really good example there, Vicki.
That all screams authenticity to me, which is, Jaymi, exactly what we're preaching here, right? Is being authentic.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Why are they doing the mental health conversation barbershop?
So yeah, as far as I know, it's basically to do with there's a mental health crisis for suicide amongst young men, particularly in EMEA and the UK. It's the biggest killer of men under the age of 40 is suicide. So he's just trying to do something about it. And maybe he's been touched by that in his lifetime. I don't know. I'll have to read up and come back to you. But it's an interesting. He's the character behind the brand. And he is the brand. And he's when you hear interviews with him, he just sounds like a really nice guy. Really, I think he's just he's the entrepreneur that most of us would love to be. If only I was that organized before the age of 30, I couldn't imagine it now. But
See, that would be something to any other brand, it would be a stunt. Open barbershops. And you know what? We want to look like we care. So let's have mental health conversations. Those are the things that I see a lot of copycats trying to do. But if it's genuinely, and I'm sure he has some story there that would be like, oh, wow, I am so even more devoted to Gymshark now when I understand, how deep this goes. And if it's that deep, it that's where you can come up with such wild ideas that don't match working out at all, but that are always going to be building, your purchase intent for your next piece of workout clothing.
But going from one brand of talking about talking about fitness, going to another brand talking about fitness. Let's go into Pentaho here and talk about the Data Fit campaign. Now, when we were talking about this before, Jaymi, in some of our pre-calls, one thing that blew me away was how when it launched internally, not just externally, how it inspired the product team. Like, can you share a little bit of narrative, a little bit of your own story about how this campaign impacted the entire organization?
Yes. Well, I talked to Maggie. She gave me the lay of the land. And if you ever look at an org chart, you're going to see how Pentaho is a relatively small business inside of the massive Hitachi and the also very big Hitachi Vantara. And sometimes when you're, the small one, you don't get very much attention. And sometimes that translates into your level of importance, let's say. And so I think morale was challenged when I first started joining. And I said to her, okay, I'll do the listening. We'll see the true story that I can hear. And our first audience will be internal. And it was. And again, like I told you, I started getting apologies on every demo. And I was like, gosh, you guys, you don't understand really how special it is what you're making. I mean, 73% of the Fortune 100 are using you because you work. You don't have to be fancy and look like everyone else and be the loudest and proudest. And the first narrative I wrote started with the sentence that you guys know: in this age of AI and machine learning, it was even before Gen AI, though it became too huge, but in this age of Gen AI, let's say, if you aren't data fit, you're going to lose to one who is. Your company, if your company isn't data fit, you're going to lose to one who is. And that's just a very easy thing to say because it's just so simple and true. And coming back internally to the company, it's like, let's think about this. Let's take my old organization, for example, who was spending all of this money. Who knows how efficiently? Probably not efficiently enough. We could have tanked the entire company because we were by far the largest expense line on the P&L. And if we had had drag and drop, can you imagine how much more successful we would be? Let's take fitness now. And then we went into just the very human kind of paradigm of being fit or not. Fit isn't the most muscly. The people with the most muscles are sometimes not the most fit. Good luck running, 5 miles. Do you sleep well? Like all these like levels of health and how actually is your heart. They wouldn't do so well. So it's not how you look only. It's fundamentally how well and efficiently you operate. And if you're efficient at the base level of data, Pentaho, guess how fast I can go? Guess how streamlined I can be? Guess how strong now every employee now that doesn't have to put in a ticket to get some data report back, person for person, we are now powerful. That's called strength. That's called efficiency. That's called agility. That means something happens in the world and we can change it this afternoon because everyone now is equipped with insights. And so, and the one thing I told them is, listen, I know what my resume looks like, and you think I'm going to come here and just give you a big B2C campaign and lipstick again. I'm going to tell you the story I'm going to market is yours. This is your story. This is your true story. And I would just use all of their own proof points to tell it. And so you would see people start to just walk taller. The tone in meetings just started to change. There's a level of pride, ownership. Like, oh my God, we are so much better than we thought, and then you guys helped us refine our value proposition down to smart simplicity, which really kind of, like I said, it's not just about being muscly. It's just fundamental fitness that matters. And that's actually really simple. And to be smart with our simplicity, thanks to Twogether, coining that press, it has impacted how the organization is working now. They're setting FY25 business objectives and the big bets. And it all is coming down to the simplicity of things. Is this smart simplicity is becoming a phrase that's being used? Are we actually using smart simplicity right now? No. Okay. How do we make it simpler?
Just as a techie and as a product, as someone who's managed products, to have like teams that aren't directly related to the marketing care and use that terminology, like that's such a vote of confidence for me, and shows just how much of a difference marketing can make. Like we worry about, should we invest in brand over here? Should is that going to make a difference? But here we're investing in in a message that's making the whole business fitter and more performant. Like it's such a powerful message. Like bringing some of our creative teams into this that have been living and breathing these insights for a while. Like, is it the same inside our teams? How would you describe it?
I think we've genuinely been inspired by the data fitness philosophy as we've gone through. The way that we have adapted our way of working, the way that we have extended the tools in which we look for. I see quite a few similarities, I guess, with what the data fitness philosophy is. To give you some examples, we're very much all about encouraging a learning culture. So what's working? What insights can we capture? How can we make things better on the move? And I guess in a similar vein, testing and adapting quickly. So one of the great things about working with Pentaho is all the different routes in which we could have explored this creatively, and there were many. But through all of those different creative routes, we were able to test what worked and what didn't work, and equally just ensuring that that always resonated with the message that we were trying to hone in on. So I think the whole kind of philosophy around taking what's in front of you and testing, working out whether it works or whether it's performing is great. And again, I guess similar also feedback loops. So, short stand-ups with the Pentaho team, with the creative team, just evolving as we go. And again, if I want to liken it to the philosophy of data fitness, it's very much, keep the training going, because um we can all get to a point of fitness, but to sustain that fitness is equally just as important. So keeping an eye on what's coming up and how we can do things better, just to keep ahead of the game, really. So yeah, lots of test and reflection, I would say, has been sort of inspired through this process, and something that we've sort of developed creatively as we've gone through as well.
Yeah, I'd definitely say as well with the idea and the theme of data fitness. I mean, the reason why I think it's so powerful is that it's timeless, in that realistically, when people talk about transformation always has an implicit endpoint. Like, you have transformed and now you're better and you're doing better outcomes and you're getting that by its very nature. That people say that it's a journey, not a destination, but transformation itself, that has to land somewhere to be able to review. But with data fitness, as Vicky will know, being an avid marathon runner, right, and fitness fanatic, it never stops. You're always it's an iterative, ongoing process that's just getting leaner and leaner, or maintaining or sustaining, or even bulking out and growing as a business. There's so many ways it can go, but with that kind of narrative, for me, it always makes Pentaho relevant. It means you'll never go out of fashion, because data fitness can really kind of grow with you, and it's where everyone needs to sort of be, or kind of a data fitness ethos and a mindset is something they should adopt. So yeah, I'm hoping it'll be around for a while.
I love this campaign, but I'm going to take this kind of upper level to the TED talk that you did, Jaymi, and all of the. I'm going to try and get this right, and then you can correct me. It's all about brand resonance. Is that correct? Like, if you were to summarize it, like how would you summarize that TED talk?
Yeah, it's the concept is building a magnetic brand. Back to the idea of what like attracts like, and when you are in your resonance, you become magnetic. And this is just proven out in our personal lives every minute of every day. And brands and businesses are just people who do things for other people. So it brings it very just human. And I gave the TED talk and referenced brands, but I think almost as much of my work is actually for leaders, is for the humans that are running these companies or leading teams or anything. And we've all had leaders that we will follow wherever they go. We trust them, and they prove it single day. Talk about like fitness. It's every moment sort of shows who you are. And leadership, especially today, I mean, we're all thinking, how much is AI really going to take over? Right? It's taking over all of that middle layer of sort of automation, any of the tasks that we do that are very repetitive, and the machines are going to do it better. So guess who's going to get the job? It'll be a machine. So the leader is called on more than we've ever been called on, and remaining human, really, really rooted. I'm you guys know I'm in Boulder, so I'll use language that is very unusual in the B2B circles, but stay in your heart, stay true, be legitimately you, so that I can feel you. And if I feel you and I resonate with you, I'm with you. I want to join you now. And so the leader or the brand, how to build a magnetic brand, how to be a magnetic leader. That's the TED Talk.
But a key part of that is, and we've talked about it, and we've jumped into it in and out of it on today's podcast, is uncovering those authentic stories, right? Uncovering who you really are. Like, what tips, Jaymi, do you give to try and, we uncovered it with Data Fit in Pentaho. Like, what tips do you do you have for trying to find that inside a company or find that inside an individual to make yourself more magnetic?
Yeah, well, the way I do it when I take companies or leaders through this, um, if you watch the TED Talk, you'll know that it's been coined a marketing seance the way I do this, but I will actually ask you questions that don't sound like I understand what you do at all. It's not in the context of business. I'm not asking about your product, the competitors, the customer, anything like that. I want to know you. I really do. I want to know what makes you light up. And not just tick, but light up. When you start talking about something, John or Vicki and Minaz, when you start talking about what lights you up, Vicki, I bet it's something with running. Minaz, I know it's got to be around EDM or some music creation. John, I'd love to get to know you more. But when you talk about that, you ignite your light, your eyes light. And now I want to know more. And so I facilitate these conversations to get you into that place of lighting up. And once you do that, now everything just starts to just roll beautifully. And, each of you does great work, but you do it as only you can, guaranteed. There are other people who do what you do. And John, you talked about getting up in the same jacket, on that stage. You're different. You're for sure different. And if I get to talk to you more, I'm going to be able to find what that is. And getting to that kind of point, and I have a little trick that I do. Um, you have to close your eyes with me. We actually have to envision some things together. And one thing I have you do is invite two people into this workshop to be with you. And they're really the two that matter most. One is a very young you, the one that just didn't understand anything other than do what I love. There's no other should. It's like I wake up and that sounds fun. Let's go do that. There's a very young one in you. And I have you envision what that little one is doing. And in fact, I want you to, in your mind's eye, I want you to play. And I can already see what happens to someone's face when their eyes are closed and they start to play with their very young one again. It's really tender. It's very, very precious. And then I ask you to sit with the old one, the one who's at the end, very end, and looks back and looks at you today and is like, I have something to say to you. And I have you listen to what they have to say. And they get it. People get it like that. What does the old one have to say to you? And so you're now bookmarked by you, the wise you, the very young wise you, the very old wise you. And you remember who you are. And at the end of this, people have a renewed sense of their own brilliance like never before. So talk about lighting up. And now we get into story. And now what gets you to tick and what makes you magnetic. And I guess that's just maybe one of my gifts. I can deeply listen and start to play it back. And that's where the narratives come from. And it's fun for these people because they're like, again, like the Pentaho team, I'm so much better than I thought. Oh my gosh. And, I don't know if you all have spouses or partners or just best friends. When they're lit up, are you not so drawn to them? You know? So this is just talk about smart simplicity. This is as human as it gets. And I'm just trying to build brands being very, very human.
But it's actually such a great exercise thinking through. I'm disappointed I didn't just do that on the podcast, by the way, and close my eyes to imagine them. I should have done that.
Yeah, I felt like we should have taken a moment to just stop and just all of us do it, But
I absolutely should have done that.
do you not think that if we did that, the younger you might look at the older you with disappointment and say, "Look, when did you give up? When did you give up on fun?"
Yeah, why did you go into B2B? What are you doing? But I actually the previous guest, Jaymi, was a lady called Rebecca McKenzie at Salesforce, and she had exactly the same, maybe not the same approach, but a similar journey, which was I don't want my if this role gets taken away from me, and this really resonated with me, by the way, talking about if this role gets taken away from me, then is that all that defines me? Like I need to make sure I know what else lights me up. So I think what you've described there is that how you get to answer that question. I think that's an incredibly valuable exercise. Uh, Minaz, we've run lots of brand workshops together, right? We've done quite a few of them. Can you imagine getting any clients to close their eyes and think about that? Like, how do we bring that into the story of B2B and how you bring that to life in a workshop? Like, are we now going to get people to close their eyes and imagine their older selves and their younger selves?
Just drift off. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I haven't tried that technique before, but I definitely think there's some value in doing, some shape or form of that. 100%. I mean, I think, taking people back to kind of who they are, where it all started, and why is a really interesting. It's the start of a right path that I think we can uncover some pretty amazing things. I mean, one of the things that we often do when developing those, particularly getting into that story is I often ask as well, um, and it can be sales teams, it can be anyone in the business, but primarily, you know, bringing it back to the customer centricity. When you are with customers, what is it that you say that changes the energy in the room? And when have you experienced that? And I find that often sales teams that we work with, such a valuable resource of, and I'd say quite sometimes a little bit too quickly dismissed as a valuable resource to that story. And we've had situations where they'll uncover this is what we talked about. And actually, it was the point we brought this different perspective, and everything changed from that point of view for the customer, for the bank, for Bank of America, etc. We're like, right, let's tap into that. And that will often uncover, so the reason why you do that is actually the purpose behind it will unlock the real true value of what that brand brings to the table. And it's those sorts of like anecdotes and stories that I find work really well. And we had a similar situation with funny enough with Hitachi's parent brand with Vantara when we were developing their global messaging. And we met person after person, exec after exec, and they all had a different opinion on really what they stood for. And it was one person that just turned up for 10 minutes and he gave us he was completely laughing. He was he was completely lit up. I mean, he'd obviously gone on his ayahuasca journey, but he walked into the room for 10 minutes and just delivered a quick speech about him spending time with customers and really what the value is, and that gave us everything that we needed to build an entire campaign. One piece of insight, but that one hook unlocked a conversation that then drew from all of the rest of the execs similar stories, similar, and you start to hear the patterns and you start to see, okay, so this is why you're invited into the room and kept in the room and ultimately signed. But it's just finding that doorway in sometimes. So yeah, for me, mine is often hearing about customer interactions, which is all really helpful because ultimately, we got to sell to those customers, so we got to make sure that we're listening to what they have to say or why they buy from the brand in the first place.
So, and salespeople, I mean, they know how to take a concept and put it into a few really compelling words. I mean, just like marketers. I think it's a mistake to not have salespeople in at that level of brand development for sure.
Completely agree. It's I'm going to bring Vicky. I'm going to bring you back in here. Like, we've been talking about the almost a very personal process. Like, can you think of any B2B brands that are that bring a lit up when we think about them? Like, I'm trying to think. Salesforce, I keep going back to, right? Let's take them off the table. But Vicky, who's the most lit up B2B brand that we think shows that example?
Gosh, I mean, on a personal level, I would probably lean towards HubSpot. I think HubSpot is a brand that really stays true to itself. And if we sort of take that step back around how authentic stories are told from a truth and how that attracts people to it, the authenticity, HubSpot's a great example. So they've had to innovate to pick up and sustain customer interest. And even though they've expanded now into things like CRM and automation as well, they very much stayed true to their core philosophy of helping businesses to grow through customer centric strategies. So I would probably say HubSpot actually for this one.
But what you've highlighted there is someone that's truly authentic and really simple, right? It's just around helping companies grow. I Jaymi, I don't know about you, but I have this problem with value propositions that have the word "and" in too many times. I think you're just trying to do too much. Like you haven't spent the time really trying to understand where you're authentic and where you're simple. Like, would you agree? Like, do you think there's a formula for creating that kind of simple message that's truly authentic?
I totally agree with you. The end product being as few words as possible. Um, Strangely, the beginning product for my value prop exercise is the most atrociously long run-on sentence possible. And we sculpt from there. But there are just 4 components that I think make up a value prop statement, and that begins with, "Why are you even doing this? Why?" And a lot of the times it's just canned. Everyone's like, "I wanna make humanity better," or, "I want to, help companies make a gazillion dollars," but, like, we have to get into the why. This is so important. And then how are you gonna do that? You're gonna create a data management platform, but then with what? Um, I guess data intelligence and integration and da 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 da. Da. Okay, now for whom? They really specific. So the why, how, what, who is the value prop stack. So lots of ands, way too many words. And then, it consolidates down into something. I mean, you guys help make it so pithy. Smart simplicity. um, but yes, the end can't have too many. But those 4 components, in my opinion, are, so important. My big issue though is still like, take any B2B company, walk them through those 4 questions, even like HubSpot, Salesforce. I respect those companies a lot. And how are they not going to sound like everybody else? They're all customer centric, right? Like this is the challenge though. Really, where is it? And being lit up is really just a clue for me. I'm not saying you need to go out there and everyone just needs to be like ebullient and joyful all the time. It's just my clue to where that is for you, where you are not going to sound like everyone else.
I think that's actually a great way, but it's good to know that you've got to start with a long story before you get to a short one. Because I do think that we always try and wordsmith a bit too much at the start as you go through and write something like that. But having a formula for how you get the right component pieces and distill it down, is that's super important. I think that we have this natural tendency to want to try and include so much, like, and we do this, and we help customers with this, and it's just it just makes everything a bit more confusing. So
Like, they just become a big soup of everything. It's like, oh, I wanted a meal, but yes, I got a whole bunch of ingredients in a soup.
what a great analogy as well. Um, so as we kind of start to close out and look to the future of B2B marketing, like what trends do you think will have the biggest impact, and how do you think brands can prepare for them? And I think you're uniquely placed here, Jamie, because you've transcended both B2C and B2B. And we often say B2B follows B2C, but I think we've disproven that today with some of our discussions around, is it emotional, and so on. So what are some of the trends that you can see coming down the pipeline that we need to be mindful of in B2B?
I were Minaz said this earlier. You can lose your job if you don't make a good decision in B2B, but you seldom lose your job if you don't make a good decision B2C. And so the stakes are really high. Trust is more important in B2B than anything. And in my opinion, authenticity builds trust. Authenticity determines how you show up all the time, everywhere, which is brand, right? Brand is not just a logo or a name, it's how you show up everywhere, all the time. And for B2B brands to have a real understanding of who they are so that they can show up consistently. They don't have to remember it. They don't need those big, letters on the walls of those companies that have great value statements that are just not true. Vision statements that are just whatever. Somebody made them up and they sound good. No, true. And everyone will know it because it's actually honestly how we do things. Then, the brand is just the last thing that meets the customer. It's the product, it's the people who make the product, it's the investors, it's every human that's involved in making this thing that people eventually buy. Are they aligned and doing something great? That's talk about simple. So, Yeah, I think authenticity and truth in B2B is absolutely paramount, and you have to get into the human to be able to do that if you're going to do it easily. And then, of course, just because of how powerful, AI really is, it's amazing. I love it. We really need leaders who are embodying this. Those are the leaders who are going to be able to hire the right people and people will follow them and be able to simplify what this company is all about, be able to go and actually create, shareholder value. And so I think every company, but yes, definitely B2B is we're going to need leaders who are grounded in this true story more than ever by far. And finally, what is the generative AI feeding on anyway? We know it's data, but it's more than that. Like I almost started my TED talk with we have an energy crisis right now. And it's not the type of that we think of, it's human. We have a human energy crisis coming. And at the end of the day, we'll see how this goes. If we lose too much humanity in everything we do, I think we will swing back. It's okay. It's just going to be maybe a little bit painful. But to stay very human right now, in all of our marketing, especially B2B, as we sit here and talk about that every company can begin to sound the same, you got to get human.
I want to hand over to Minaz and Vicky. Like future, how do those future trends sound, and what have we got to add to it from our side?
So I think, yeah, totally agree with all the things that Jamie's talks about there. The kind of the revert, the I suppose reconsideration of the human element is going to be more important than ever before. I think trust in brands is always been there, but it's now more important than ever before. The one area I would say is probably slightly more on the kind of I would say tactical level, but a strategic level for B2B campaigns is the real coming together of brand and demand. And we're starting to see so many clients and so many brands really embrace that properly and starting to look at, we don't have a brand campaign on the left hand side and then a demand gen campaign on the right. It's now looking at it as one connected journey. And there's some really good, interesting brands that have embraced that and are doing it. Workday, Sage. These are all companies that are very, very brand led, but you see the multiplier effect it has on their demand gen. And I think those two coming together, we all love a connected story. And I think more than ever, the top story that I hear needs to continue right the way down to purchase and beyond. I think to your point, Jamie, there about everyone needs to embody the brand story and the brand values. They often talk about that a brand isn't just a logo and a name and a tagline. It's when you walk into a bank and how the teller or the customer service representative treats you. What's the human interaction that you have is branding. It transcends every single part of the business, so it's absolutely key. So yeah, back to the point. I think the brand and the sort of the collaboration of brand and demand really coming together. I'm excited to see where that can go. Some of the work we're doing in ABM, this is why it fascinates me, is that brand in ABM is almost intrinsic. It's part and parcel of it. You wouldn't go straight to demand. It's always a credibility, a trust building exercise in part of that process. It's never not on the table. So that really excites me. And I think, how can we make that thinking go across all B2B marketing, from wide scale lead generation all the way down to one-to-one ABM programs targeting the top CIOs in the 10 companies? It's the same sort of thinking, but because we're all humans, we're all reacting the same way. So yeah, that's kind of my big one for 2026.
How we doing it, and how we bring the authenticity to it. Vicky, over to you for how do we connect all those threads together? Not just a tiny order here, just to try and bring those future trends to a connection point.
Of course. And actually, I think I think I have one, which is leaning into both that kind of human side of things, but also the connection. And for me, for the year ahead or years ahead, it's already happening to an extent, but certainly more so as we move forward, is this importance around community, community-led growth, social selling. So the likes of LinkedIn, industry forums, brand-led communities, these things are going to be so critical for both engagement and influence moving forward. And I think if anything, this conversation comes back continually to sort of authenticity and trust, and we are more likely to trust one another. So I think the power the power distribution is actually possibly going to be handed even more so to those communities than ever before, and that's certainly something worth investing thought in terms of how best to manage and empower that as well.
And I'd say that embodies authenticity and energy so well as well. Like, the community element of it is a great summary there, Vicky. So we have some really good ending points there. And I'm going to come back to Jaymi, your point around the energy crisis. I actually had one of my first ever mentors said to me, you need to manage, one of the most important things you can do is understand what gives you energy and what takes it away. And I think we need to do that for our own brands as well. And there's nothing that takes more energy away than an unauthentic brand that isn't able to speak to its community effectively, that isn't able to build its brand effectively, from what you've said there, Minaz, as well. And so if I'm to tie some of these points together, you've got to start with an authentic story that helps to build the energy and build your community. So Jaymi, it's been a real pleasure having you on the Tech Marketing Podcast today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I believe you're putting together a book on this topic. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, about resonance design.
So when's it due out, and when do we need to get you back on the podcast to talk about it?
Oh gosh, I think it's in the proposal phase right now, so it probably won't be out for a good 6 to 12 months. But when it is, I will be sending you guys a copy and would love to come back and talk about it. I've already started to build your brands, by the way. We'll do that off, line. I have thoughts for each of you. Personal brands that turn into, just differentiating. Each of you does, what you do really, really well, but there's something special. So
Can't wait for a follow-up. Let's do it when certainly is doing the books out and see if those brands have been built. So, Jaymi, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Tech Marketing Podcast today.